So contrary to popular belief about cortisol causing fat gain, in a way, it actually is very necessary for fat loss to have some cortisol floating around. And this is important because we need to understand that when we are releasing out cortisol, cortisol is going to go to those target organs like our fat tissue and start snipping the fat up and allowing it to be freed out into the bloodstream. So it's essentially going to cause fat loss. But what we do need to understand about cortisol is it's actually going to also cause a redistribution of fat. So you may be breaking down fat tissue from your extremities, so your arms and your legs, but it does redistribute the fat to your midsection. So that's why if you see somebody with a condition called Cushing's syndrome, this is where they have excess cortisol release. So that's going to actually cause them to have very, very thin arms and legs, but in fact, they might have a larger midsection and they might carry quite a lot of fat at the back of their neck. So another reason you might actually lose weight when you are chronically stressed is because cortisol can also go to the muscle tissue and start breaking down the proteins that we have in our muscle tissue. This is because our body can also use amino acids for energy. So if we snip up the proteins that we have in our muscle tissue, we can also create some energy that way, not just from our fat tissue and our glycogen stores. Something that's also worthwhile noting as well is that cortisol can also inhibit our collagen synthesis. So this means that if we don't have our collagen being able to be produced, then we effectively can't really make very strong bone. We can't make a lot of new muscle. So you might actually be losing a lot of muscle mass when your cortisol is high. This can actually make somebody look like they're losing weight on the scale, but in fact it's just a lot of muscle mass, which unfortunately down the line can slow your metabolism and things like that. So again, in a way, you're actually possibly losing weight when you've got excess cortisol, but you're redistributing some of that fat to your midsection. So when we look at a condition called adrenal insufficiency, this is where for a number of different reasons you can't actually pump out really any cortisol at all. This will actually result in an inability to actually break down any fat tissue at all because that cortisol is just not existing in the right amounts. So as we can see, it's important that we do have some cortisol so that we can actually go to target tissue like our fat tissue and break it down so we can use it for energy. So if you want to actually lose any body fat, you do need the appropriate amounts of cortisol floating around. So it's not completely the enemy. But when it's excessively released chronically, as we can see, it's going to make us redistribute our fat and we're going to hold more in our midsection, which is not great for, metabolic syndrome and issues like that.